It's go time.
Welcome to the Third Down Gamble podcast with your hosts, Don Charbin and Heath Graham.
Two out of three ain't bad. Amazing finish to that Tiger Cats Argonauts game in Hamilton. Wow. Superlatives, hyperbole. I don't think we can go far enough with any of them tonight.
As you said, 2 out of 3 games came right down to the wire this past week. The Edmonton-Calgary game got away from the Elks a bit early, and the Stampeders did not give them a chance to get back into it. The other games, we had some swings both directions and some pretty entertaining last couple of minutes in both of those ones.
Yes, we enjoyed a lot of great football. Now, you and I went to Regina to watch the Roughriders and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers play in the annual-ish, 60th anyway, Labor Day Classic, which proved to be a classic when it was all said and done. But it has its talking points beyond that. But let's first just sort of walk through our day. For us, it's about a 12 to 13 hour day to do the wraparound from where I live, and you're about a half hour south of me. So for you, it's a little bit shorter. But I started my day getting to your place. I left at about 10:30, got to your place just after 11. Then we get in the car, off we go to Regina. One pit stop on the way down. And then, of course, at Chamberlain, there's a check stop, which totally fine, but it slows everything to a snail's pace. Luckily, we had accounted for that in our travel time. Got through that without a problem. Got to the Turvey Center, which is in the north part of Regina. That's where we catch our bus, and then we go in. Game over. This time, I got to give Regina and the city of Regina, at least the busing, credit, because so many times you come out of the stadium after a big game, there's a deluge of people coming out, and the buses are one, and then you wait 5 or 10, and then another. This time they were all just coming, one right after the other, and that got us out of there fast. And by the time I think we got to the parking lot again, what was that, around 8:35, 8:45, something like that?
I was going to say it was a little bit closer to 9 than it was 8:30, but somewhere in that general vicinity.
Yeah. And so then the trek is back to Saskatoon for you, north of Saskatoon for me. And I get home at about 12:30. So you think of my day, that's 10:30 to 12:30 at night. And I do that 10 times a year. Granted that start times change and everything like that. The best I can do is maybe 11 and a half hours if everything works perfectly. It's part of life being a fan of football. I'm sure there's a lot of followers in the United States do the same thing for the teams that they follow, college, professional. Up here in Canada, that's what you got to do. Distances are so expansive.
And you're right. I do want to give a shout out to the transit people operating those buses. It was the smoothest that I've experienced at a Riders game. A record crowd at New Mosaic as well. So you have to take into consideration, this was the most people they've had in that stadium for a CFL game. And it ran quite smooth getting people in and out of there. We, of course, get to the stadium pretty early, shortly after the gates open, some of the first fans inside the building, so we can take in warm-ups and everything else that's going on at that time as well. But a great job by all involved for a smooth operation, a very enjoyable game. And as a Bomber fan sitting in Mosaic Stadium, I have to say, the section that we sit in, I have to give a shout out to those folks because they're great to people wearing the opposite colors. We've been doing this traditionally now for several years, so I recognize some faces when I come back to that game, but it's a real enjoyable and welcoming experience, and we generally have a really good time, win or lose.
I would hope that that's always the case between the two centers, because there is a huge rivalry. Same with Calgary and Edmonton, Toronto, Hamilton. Yes, you may cheer for a team of a different color, but let's be civil to each other. Cheer for your team, not against the other team. If something good happens for the other side, recognize that, give them a high five, whatever. You and I were doing that throughout the night. But it's tough when sometimes people carry it too far. And that's every venue. You can go to a rock concert. You can go to a kid's hockey game. There are people that just take things too far. It's very important that our section treats
to
you
give
well.
Another shout out to the Bomber fans that do travel to Mosaic for this game as well. Some years I've been really hard pressed to find other Bomber fans looking around the stadium. This year you could not miss them. There was pockets of blue and gold scattered throughout the stadium. So the fans have really traveled well. We know there's going to be a lot of Rider fans heading the other way to Winnipeg next weekend as well. So it really makes it a full, enjoyable experience when you get those fans willing to travel to support their teams.
Absolutely. For that trip, Winnipeg to Regina, I believe it's about 6-7 hours to get there via vehicle. That's a huge commitment. It typically means it's going to be a hotel stay because you're not going to turn around so fast. So that's a bit of change out of your pocketbook, but in the same breath, you get to see exciting football, and there's a lot of stories that you can take home. Let's go to that game now in earnest. First and foremost, the non-call on AJ Ouellette. When he's running through the line, his grill gets grabbed and ripped off his head. Cam Lawson gets his hand into the face mask, pulls his head sideways. The helmet spins off his head very quickly and is on the ground. The two back officials don't see the foul. People are looking at the replay on this big screen and wondering how could that have missed. Even Lawson was very sheepish afterward. If you watch the replay of the moment, he's looking around thinking he's going to get 15 for this. Like, he can't escape this. And it doesn't happen. People are asking, why wasn't the replay booth, why weren't they involved? Why didn't they correct this? Well, there's a fundamental reason why they didn't, and that is they cannot make a call from the replay booth.
That's right. They can overturn if a flag were to be thrown for a face mask, and upon review there was no infraction. They can reverse it, take away an incorrect call in that regard. They cannot make the call for a missed face mask infraction. The Bombers got away with one on this particular play. It happens. At the end of the season, you add up the good and bad that go for and against your team, and it's going to be pretty close to even. It didn't really result in a disadvantage for the Riders, a huge disadvantage. I mean, they would have gained more yards on that penalty. They didn't stall out on that drive, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It was an issue where it was a missed call, but the end results still netted positive for the Riders.
Yes, it worked out that the call was mitigated by the fact that the Roughriders still managed to get the first down on the next play. For AJ Ouellette, who's very understandably heated in the moment, which you can see on the field, he's just incredulous. Sometimes officials are obscured. They just can't see through, and it's great that we've got television cameras all over the place, including the spider cam, that could see it and show it quite readily. The replay booth is there to correct a mistake. They can't enforce a penalty that they think should have happened. Maybe the gray area was quarterbacks, whether or not a quarterback got a high hit or not. But I think, have moved away from that now with this new iteration of, instead of being called the command center, they're now the replay booth. And essentially that's what their job is to do, is to correct call that was made that probably shouldn't have been made. And that would be a high hit, like spearing, exactly what we just talked about, the face mask, those types of things. But they don't have the right to step in and say, guys, you missed that, because then where do you stop? Oh, that was pass interference. Oh, wait a minute. That guy over there, that's illegal contact. Over there, you don't stop.
We may have to fact check ourselves. Roughing the passer, you're right, is one that they may still be able to make that call on. I know roughing the passer is a challengeable call, as is forward pass interference. Face mask infractions aren't challengeable by the coaches either. So there was no challenge flag thrown to review the play in this situation either. And I'm not going to make excuses for the officiating crew missing this call. I am going to mention a draw up the middle. There's a massive bodies, a massive humanity converging on the person carrying the ball. It does make it challenging to see. I agree it was a missed call that in hindsight should have been made. When you take into consideration all of those moving parts and the size of the players involved, you can see how something like that could be missed.
Officials are graded on how they perform during the regular season. The bonus for them is playoffs. They get extra games, and if you get to work your Grey Cup, that's a big feather in your cap. But you're getting graded through all of this. So a call like that is missed, you're going to get graded on that. And that will impact you going forward playoff games. They want the best people who are enjoying a very good year, getting everything right, to be in those playoff games. And they're giving you all these chances throughout the season to make sure you're getting it right. It could be a good year for you. It could be a bad year for you. Just the way the ball moves, the way the players move, the way that you happen to be looking at that moment, any number of a myriad of things could happen. It's no different than why is it teams can't score a touchdown on every drive. There's a lot of things that go on that prevent that from happening. If you're an official and you don't feel great about it, you and I have both been officials, you don't want to miss the call. You don't want to impact the game.
One other play, and a big play where the replay center was involved, was late in the fourth quarter in this one. The Riders, Trevor Harris pulled off a punt, a coffin corner punt, beautifully executed by Trevor Harris. Dietrich Nichols went back on the return for the Bombers, and it appeared with the first call that a safety had been scored because Nichols went back into the end zone, was tackled, and that appears to have been the situation where a safety was called. The replay booth, because it was a scoring play, it was their prerogative to review that play, as they do on all potential scoring plays. They determined that Nichols' momentum running back for the ball, that momentum carried him into the end zone. And although his feet cleared the goal line, the ball was in his right arm, and he did not fully clear the end zone with the ball. And it was determined at that point that it was a conceded single point as opposed to a 2-point safety.
Getting into the minutia of the finer points of what this is, when Nichols grabs the ball, he is about at the 1 yard line, but his momentum, the ball is moving towards the goal line, and his momentum is going that way as well. By rule, if your momentum is carrying you into the end zone, in other words, you're being propelled by events before you touch the ball, then you can't be held accountable for crossing into the end zone with the football. He gets it in the end zone. He turns. His feet actually do step outside the goal line, and then he gets tackled. By rule, the entire football must come out of the end zone before he's considered outside of the end zone. So if there was no point at which that football made it outside the end zone and then he got tackled back in the end zone, then the most you'd get, given his momentum at the beginning that carried him into the end zone, even though he got his feet outside, the ball didn't get back out, he gets tackled in the end zone, the most you get is a single point on the play.
And where you often see this momentum come into play is more in an interception. If an offense is moving down the field and they're throwing a deep ball to the 2 or 3 yard line, often a defensive back in coverage is running full speed in step with that receiver. He turns and catches the ball, maybe on the 1 yard line, close to the goal line. There's no way he's able to stop that momentum that carries him into the end zone. The result of that play is down in the end zone. They move the ball out. He's not downed at the 1, and the offense is taking over from there. So the momentum carrying somebody, you do see quite often. This was just a unique play in that it was for a safety and determining whether or not the ball came back out of the end zone.
Getting into that play even further, let's discuss the whole point of even trying the quick kick. This was a third down play. Looked like the Riders were gambling, and then Harris takes the snap and quick kicks it towards the goal line. It was a beautiful kick. He did very well. On the sideline, standing beside Coach Mace, is the place kicker, Brett Lowther. And he's looking at this situation and pleading with the coach, saying, let me try this. It would have been about a 51-yard field goal attempt for him. He had missed a convert earlier in the football game. What do you think Corey Mace is thinking when he is looking at this situation going, no, I don't want to try the field goal?
This indicates to me that Corey Mace has lost some confidence in Brett Lowther. It's a long kick. It was into what wind there was as well. It wasn't a really windy day, but the wind was coming out of that south end zone. So he would have been 51 into a little bit of a breeze. Even if he had the leg to put it through, they get a single point, which was the end result of this punt as well. But it really indicates that there's not a lot of confidence there with the game on the line. And that's unfortunate because we know Brett Lothar has made a career out of clutch kicks late in games, and to see that lack of confidence, perhaps some lack of confidence in himself as well, it has to be tough to watch.
There could have been other factors involved in this too. And one of the elements that maybe we need to discuss is that Lowther had his first child earlier in the week on Thursday, I believe. He probably didn't have much sleep in the intervening time until the football game. And there may have been some compassion being shown by Corey May saying, look, you've been through a lot already. We've got this other plan. Let's just go with it. Even though Lowther had literally traipsed about 20 yards down the sideline to go to talk to the coach to find out, why aren't you putting me in there? I'm ready. I'm good. I can do this.
The end result was the Bombers were ill prepared for that play to come off too. It was a 3rd and 6. Often if it's less than 5 yards on a third down play, they might be trying to draw the defense offside. We saw the Riders successfully do that earlier in the game, drawing Willie Jefferson offside on a 3rd and 5, resulted in a first down. 3rd and 6, that offside isn't going to get you to the first down. There had to be something in the works, and it would have been pretty high risk for the Riders to attempt a regular offensive play and come up short. The kick by Harris, as we said, caught the Bombers off guard, but I believe that was a failure on the Bombers' special teams and defense to not be prepared for something like that to happen.
It's part of the NFL too. You can do the exact same thing. The net result is the extra point for the Roughriders. As far as yards gained, instead of getting the Bombers what they hoped was down near the 1 yard line, the Bombers give up the single and come back out to the 40. So the Riders netted 4 on the whole process, but they got a point, which proved to be very significant. One other piece, and you mentioned his name, Willie Jefferson. You and I sat there looking at that first quarter, and he was not out on defense. He was only out on special teams in that first quarter. What was going on there?
We'll probably never find out the whole story. There's some speculation in the stands that maybe he had some disciplinary issues that the coaches weren't happy with that resulted in that. There could be some injuries, some equipment issues. It's unknown to us, and I don't know that we'll ever hear the answer, but certainly those first 2 offensive series for the Riders, he was not on the field on defense, came out on punt coverage in both of those situations. After that, he was into the more regular rotation.
But it begs the question, why do you have your most expensive defensive player, the guy that everyone fears, standing on the sidelines when your defense is out there to start the football game? He gets to come out on punt cover? You're telling me that isn't a message being sent to him?
It probably is. And like I said, we won't get the root cause of what that situation was, but somewhere along the line, the coaching staff determined that he was watching those first 2 series.
If you want to watch some great football that isn't CFL football, but it's still Canadian, I highly recommend U Sport. The Canada West schedule started on Thursday, so there are games Thursday and Friday. I watched 3 of the 4, I believe. Some crazy football. Probably the most significant was the game in Calgary. Well, the Calgary Dinosaurs, the University of Calgary Dinosaurs, were playing the University of Regina Rams. And the Dinosaurs, who had given up a safety touch, and Pat, who's been on our show and co-hosted from the beginning, and I argued vociferously about the necessity of giving up 2. I hated it. We've had Derek Taylor point out how it results in more points being scored against you. In this case, in Calgary, that's exactly what happened. But the guys in the booth were saying, well, it's a smart idea to give up the safety because it doesn't hurt you. 2 more points, what's the difference make? Well, they kick off and the Regina Rams go down the field and score a touchdown. So 2 became 9. Regardless of that, the Dinos make the comeback. And on the final play of regulation, what do? You're down by a point. Now in U Sport, they still follow traditional Canadian football rules. They're kicking off from the 45. A lot of the things that you and I grew up with before they were changed here in the last 10 years, that's what they do in U Sport. So the Dinos go out, they set up the first time. They've got 6 guys on one side, 5 on the other, and the kicker. So the Rams call the timeout. And, okay, we know what they're doing. Dinos come back out after the timeout. Now they've loaded the left side of the field and left 2 guys on the right side. So the Rams now are scrambling, thinking, oh my goodness, they've changed the call. They're going to go for the short kick and try to recover it. Instead, the kicker hits a line drive, and the Rams have left one player back in the end zone to get the ball out. He knuckles this ball. For whatever reason, though, I don't understand this, why the returner was at the front of the end zone when he should have been at the back. Make sure you get the ball and get in front of it and knock it down, do something, and get it out of the end zone. But instead, he winds up chasing the ball and batting it out the back of the end zone because he can't get a handle on it. The Dinos tie the game with a single.
What's interesting, and you started talking about the safety, and I have noticed over the last couple of seasons, you see a lot less offenses conceding the 2 points. And I think that speaks volumes to the quality of the punters in this league as well. They feel a lot more confidence in letting that guy boot it out of the end zone. This was a perfect example of that. You give up the 2, it ends up you give up 9. And that's the risk that you take when you give up the safety. You kick it out. Yes, you give up some field position. Worst case scenario, it results in 7. You might hold them to 3. You might get a turnover or force a punt, and it doesn't cost you anything. So we're seeing less and less of the conceded safety. This is a prime example of why the Rouge should remain in Canadian football as well. This was a mad play. The returner, had he been towards the back of the end zone, would have had the option to run it out or kick it out, which creates all sorts of chaos, because then the original kicking team has to give the no yards.
The 5-yard halo, yes.
The 5-yard halo, that can create all sorts of chaos in there as well.
It made the final moments of that football game fun. That was with 6 seconds to go when the Dinosaurs, or the Dinos, I should say, kicked that ball and got their single on the kickoff. Going back to the safety, just quickly, the Dinos had the wind at their back. The punter was probably about 5 yards deep in his end zone. I didn't understand it then, and they were chasing that 2 points for the rest of the quarter. They had to make a 2-point convert to get within 1 with 6 seconds to go. Had they not given up that 2-point safety voluntarily, they would have been playing for the win if they went for the 2-point convert, or at least the regular convert tied it. And then the game did go into overtime. The Rams did win it. And it's another adage that kind of played out again. The team that gets the ball first wins about 2 out of every 3 overtime games. And the Rams got the ball first, went down and scored. The Dinos couldn't respond.
When will teams learn that the statistics don't lie? The coaches still tend to want to go second in overtime if given that opportunity. But as you mentioned, we're over 60% of the time, the team that gets the ball first wins. At some point, they have to recognize that that is a true statistic. We've seen enough of a sample size now of overtime games where this has occurred. It's amazing stubbornness shown by the coaches that they want to continue to go against what the numbers tell them.
In 3 Grey Cups where this new format has been employed, the team with the ball first won the Grey Cup. Edmonton over Montreal, Ottawa over Calgary, Winnipeg over Hamilton.
But we always get the ball last, so we know what we have to do.
Teams collapse sometimes under that pressure. The Alouettes are finally getting healthy. When you see the list of names that are finally coming back to the lineup, David Dallaire, fullback. Austin Mack and Tyson Philbott will be back on the field. One I'm thinking is going to be most impactful, Mustafa Johnson. Marc-Antoine Dequoy, going to be huge. And then James Letcher Jr., who I haven't seen in a long time. They're all getting healthy. They're all practicing with the team. They should be available for their game this weekend against Hamilton. It's so important to be healthy at this time of the year. The Alouettes have been tumbling. Maybe this will help stem the tide. We don't know yet the status of Davis Alexander, whether that quarterback will be available. He is practicing, but limited because of that hamstring.
That's the big one. There are some very important names that you mentioned that are getting back to game ready. It's all well and good to have Tyson Philpott and Austin Mack back, but if you're still running out your number 4 or number 5 quarterback on your depth chart, how much impact can those receivers have? I think the defense getting Mustafa Johnson and Marc-Antoine Dequoy is huge as well, because we know when healthy that Alouettes defense has the capability of winning a game almost on their own. They can get a defensive score. Getting James Letcher back there, it gives you an opportunity for a special team score as well. So maybe the offense doesn't have to be bang on 100%. If they've got those other two facets of the game going full speed, they can be a difference maker.
Couldn't agree more. The defense, for what it's worth through this period without Davis Alexander, has held its own, relatively speaking. They've given up a few more points than they normally would, but they've kept the team in the game. They just can't get enough from their offense, put some points on the board, and that's where they've kind of stalled out. Chad Kelly has posted, I think this is on Instagram, that he is coming back on 9/13/25. September the 13th, 2025. He is expecting to be back with the Argonauts. That's against the Edmonton Elks that night. Ooh, what do you think of that?
I think Nick Arbuckle's on pace for almost 6,000 yards passing this season if he were to get the start in all 18 games. He understands his role on this team, though, as well. He's been outspoken in understanding the fact that this is Chad Kelly's team. He's filling the role while Kelly recovers from the injury. But that's got to be tough for Arbuckle. Reigning Grey Cup MVP, on pace for 6,000 yards, to just turn it back over to a guy coming back from that kind of catastrophic injury. There was no debate last year when Chad Kelly had his 9-game suspension and he came back. We knew he was going to be into that number one spot. The record for wins isn't any better than it was last year without Chad Kelly, but man, those yards and points that Arbuckle net offense is putting up, maybe you ease him back a little bit and don't have him going full tilt because you know you've got Arbuckle as the capable guy that's been moving the ball for you.
After what happened in Hamilton, I'd be hard-pressed if I was Ryan Dinwiddie to justify starting Chad Kelly. Until Nick Arbuckle really falters, I think Chad Kelly can use the time to heal up a lot more, and don't put him into the game. He's there if you need him, but if you don't need him, and Arbuckle is performing at the level that he is, and you bring up the whole business of the suspension, the Argos went 5-4 during that run. And that was with Cameron Dukes quarterbacking. That was with Arbuckle quarterbacking. They were kind of rotating through in that period. Arbuckle really never seemed to be comfortable with this offense until about a third of the way through this season. And then suddenly he's gone crazy with his numbers, going over 400 and change against the BC Lions. He goes over 300 again against the Tiger Cats. And he is on pace. He could, if he kept this up, he could even touch 6,000 yards, which is just probably 25, 30 years since we've had anybody come close to that. I believe David Archer was the last person to do it. That's a long time ago. That's the 90s.
Looking at the league leaders right now, Arbuckle is number one in passing yards with 3,828, almost 400 ahead of Bo Levi Mitchell. Touchdown passes, he's throwing 23 to Bo's 24. So right at the top of the leaderboard in those important categories for quarterbacks. I agree with you. I would be hard pressed if I was Ryan Dinwiddie to immediately hand the reins back over to Chad Kelly. This is record-setting numbers that you can't overlook. And as you mentioned, you give Kelly some extra time on the sidelines to recover. You know he's there if Arbuckle has a bad game, a bad half. You can throw Chad Kelly out there, but this is a tough situation, a call that I'm happy I don't have to make.
I'm with you on that. I don't want to be Ryan Dinwiddie in this case, but I can't see, just because Chad Kelly is stating that he's going to be available and ready for this game, doesn't mean that I have to employ him in the huddle. I can keep him on the sidelines with me. You compare and contrast the Alouettes and the Toronto Argonauts. The Alouettes have the better defense and the worse offense. They're losing games. The Argonauts have the worst defense, but the better offense. They're winning games. You can't take that out on Arbuckle and say, well, look, you got to sit on the bench because, yeah, it is Chad Kelly's team and we're paying him the big bucks here. You can't always do that. You sometimes have to pull yourself away from the brink and say, look, this guy's providing and this offense is providing. And then you get Mackay Polk back into the lineup. And look what he did in that game against Hamilton. And Arbuckle gets one game with him. And then you're saying, nope, that's it. You're out of here. I know Arbuckle is such a class guy. He will never make a stink about anything. But in this case, Ryan Dinwiddie, you better watch how you step. Andrew Hoskins, who was on our podcast last week, said this could really disrupt the Argonauts, given what happens next when Kelly is available and ready. And I, at first, thought maybe not, but now I'm moving to his side a lot more.
Toronto is still hanging on to the third playoff spot in the East. However, they would lose that crossover right now to the BC Lions. So they need to continue to string some wins together and get back in this. The disruption of swapping Arbuckle back out for Chad Kelly might set you back a game or two, and you really can't afford it at this point.
Kelly has not played a meaningful snap since he broke his leg in the third quarter of the East final. How can he be game ready under any circumstance where you've got a guy that's just slinging it and providing you with everything you want on offense? And if DeMonte Coxey gets back in there, you've got Polk and Coxey to throw it to. Who's going to stop the Argonauts offense? Keep with what you got that you know is working. Make the change only if required.
This is Andrew Hoskins of the Turf District Podcast, and you're listening to the Third Down Gamble Pod.
The 60th Labor Day weekend matchup between the Blue Bombers and the Roughriders came down to the wire, as we mentioned earlier. Some wild finishes this past weekend. The Riders hang on for a 34-30 win. Bombers got off to a hot start. Riders came back, and then the Bombers had to rally late to get back into it. What were your takeaways from this one?
The way this game finished brought me back to the rematch of the Calgary Stampeders and the Edmonton football team in 2001, where Edmonton had gone down the field, scored a touchdown late. They were up one, decided to go for the 2-point conversion. Jason Moss takes a step back and fires the ball across, expecting to find a receiver there, and chaos ensues.
Now do you go for two here? Now Edmonton has a 1-point lead. 33-32.
Yes.
35-32 means a field goal can't beat you if the Stampeders, with 45 seconds on the clock, get anywhere near.
They're trying to figure it out right now.
That's why I always throw the math questions to you.
Yeah, no, you go for two. Ron Williams is coming in the game, and Tom Higgins doesn't like what he's got out there right now. But he's used his timeout. He can't do anything about it. Ron Williams in the game late. Here comes Chris Hardy to take Sean Daniels out. So they're going with the passing set. And yes, they are going for two.
Edmonton with a 1-point lead on a 65-yard touchdown by Quincy Jackson. Eskimos on a 2-point convert attempt last time. Missed. Moss this time will miss again. Now you can take this all the way back, Stampeders.
Unbelievable.
And this will count for two if he makes it. All the way. It's a 2-point advantage or addition to the Stampeders. Can you believe that? William Fields.
The Calgary Stampeders now have a 1-point lead in this game.
There was a couple of plays that raised some questions in this one in my mind. Now, if we want to look at the scoring, Sergio Castillo missed a long field goal. Brett Lothar missed a single-point convert. That skewed some of the math, made teams go for 2 points in some different situations. What really stood out to me was the Bombers forced a fumble deep in Saskatchewan's end in the first half. It was a 1st and goal from the 5-yard line, and they chose to put Chris Strevler out on offense instead of Zach Collaros. A Brady Oliveira run and a Chris Strevler run later leaves them 3rd and goal from the 2. There's people questioning whether they should have gone for it on 3rd and goal from the 2. I'm more questioning what the heck Chris Strevler was doing out there on 1st and goal from the 5. You've got 25 yards of field, counting the 20-yard end zone. Get out there and run your offense. With Zach Collaros at the helm, they have consistently made plays of 6, 7, 8 yards. That's all they needed to score a touchdown. Kevin Sklercius has been making a name for himself this year on those 6, 7-yard catches that Drew Wolotarski used to consistently do for the Bombers. They had Dalton Schoen back in the lineup. He's sure-handed on some of those mid-range catches. Nick Dembski was having a great night. It made zero sense to me to have Strevler out there trying to just run the ball through.
It's not the first time on this podcast you've brought up that point. I don't argue with you, especially given what happened to Strevler last year when his knee got blown up in the Banjo Bowl. It begs the question, why are you doing this from 5 yards away? Because you're basically mono kind of attitude. We're going to push you back and we're going to score because we're going to fire off the line better than you can. Well, sometimes that doesn't work. Roughriders proved it in that case. And you don't have any creativity. When you've got Zach Collaros out there, you got all kinds of options available to you. So you can hand it off to Brady Oliveira. You can do an end sweep with Dembski. You can do a million things. Soon as Strevler comes out there, you know what's happening.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the Bombers have been successful once or twice on Collaros throwing a corner route to Nick Dembski in the end zone for a touchdown. And once or twice is a bit of an understatement there because that's been a play that has made career numbers for both of those guys. And you take that away by putting Chris Strevler out there. As I said, you don't just have the 5 yards to the goal line. You've got all of that space in behind. You can run your regular offense. And it was, to me, that was the most egregious move by Jason Hogan and the offensive play calling. There's some other ones that we can look at as well, but that jumped off the page. Had they turned that into a touchdown as opposed to a chip shot field goal by Sergio Castillo, the numbers change in that game as well.
And of course, Mary Alford, who made his return to the Roughriders lineup, makes a big kick return late in the game, cuts across the middle of the field and fumbles the football, gives the Blue Bombers a short porch to come back down and score a touchdown and create some tension in that stadium. 34,243. That is a record for Mosaic Stadium. And the reason why the number is so big is because for the first time that I can recall, they sold standing room only. And that really helps the Roughriders in their bottom line. It also created a tremendous atmosphere in the stadium. 29 Celsius at kickoff. It's hard to believe that just 3 days ago it was 29 Celsius because tonight we are under a frost warning.
We're into September and fall is here.
Now, if we look at the stats, the Blue Bombers, both teams, neither team scores in the first quarter, which is, you kind of wonder how they get to 34-30, but neither one scores. Tavon Campbell's pick of Zach Collaros, and it's almost reminiscent. That's why I went back fields. It's almost reminiscent of how he did his. He just stepped in front of a corner route, took off down the field, and no one was going to catch him. 2 points that the Roughriders score in the play instead of Winnipeg tying the game at 32. Now they're down 4, and this sort of creates that chaos with the short kick. Roland Milligan steps in front of the ball, has it for about a half a second, and then fumbles it as he's hit. Sergio Castillo dives on the football, and the melee ensues, and by the time they unpile everybody, he doesn't have the ball anymore.
Unfortunately for the Bombers, and this is no knock on Sergio Castillo, because I think he's a great athlete and a phenomenal kicker, he's the last player in that roster that you want in the bottom of the pile fighting for the ball. He just doesn't have the size and the upper body strength to compete against sure-handed defensive players that are in there fighting for it. He came up short. And upon review, you can't overturn it. Had he fallen directly on the ball, there would maybe be enough there to say, yes, he had possession. He got his hands to it first, but he was laying on his side, and there's no way that he could win the battle. That allowed the Riders to retain possession and run out the clock. But again, right down to the finish, even with the 2-point convert making it 4 points, there was still a play and still a chance. It's not unusual for this matchup between the Bombers and Riders in Regina to come down to a final minute and last couple of plays. We've seen some amazing results previously, and this one created a lot of tension, as you said, and it was an exciting and loud finish.
The replay center, they can get involved with this because it is an apprehended or it is a turnover on the play, and they have to double check to make sure. And even with the replay, they decided that because Castillo did not have that ball tucked under his body, he had his arm on the ball, but it wasn't tucked under his body. He didn't have established control. And once that melee begins and all these bodies are coming in there and fighting for that football. The replay booth backs up and says, well, that's up to the guys on the field to unpile them and figure this out, because we can't see through that many players' jerseys to see where the football was, when, and who had it for how long. So it just becomes a will of who wants it the most and who has the most leverage to gain it.
At the quarterback position, it was actually a pretty solid night for Zach Collaros. He goes 26 of 37 for 3 touchdowns and 1 late interception. Trevor Harris, a little bit quieter, 17 for 27 and 1 touchdown, 219 yards. The second week in a row that Trevor Harris has failed to crack the 70% completion rate. I thought both quarterbacks did well, all things considered. The first quarter, a little bit slow by both of them. Collaros was throwing on the rush a lot more than we've seen in the past. The offensive line was really having a tough time keeping that Saskatchewan defense at bay.
Curious stat out of this football game, and who, raise your hand, would have thought that the Roughriders would outrush the Winnipeg Blue Bombers by almost a factor of 4. In other words, about 4 times as many yards as the Blue Bombers got. The Riders, 133 total yards of rushing. The Blue Bombers, 25. So it's a factor of really 5.
A bit of a surprise. The Bombers really struggled to establish Brady Oliveira on the run early. They did throw his way a bit as well. He had 5 catches on 6 targets for 30 yards. But that Riders defensive line has proven to be difficult to run against. I thought a couple of those linebackers had some huge games for them as well. Malik Carney and Jameer Thurman backing up that defensive line were standouts as well.
Nick Dembski, again, he's just been a thorn in the Riders' side ever since he left for Winnipeg from Saskatchewan. 7 catches, 89 yards, and a touchdown. Dylan Mitchell, 3 catches, 3 targets for 28 yards. He's starting to show up in this offense. On the other side, the Riders really spread it around. Keyshawn Johnson getting the most touches, 5 catches on 9 targets. Relatively speaking, nobody else had more than 3 catches among any other receivers or running backs. The Riders were really content with moving it around. The big play, of course, was the Tommy Neal touchdown pass. That it was a 69-yarder. Now, the Blue Bombers had a couple of long ones themselves. It really was an entertaining football game. Like the catch that Kevin Clarcius made, that catch by Carrick Wheatfall at the back of the end zone. Spectacular. There was plays like that all over the place. If you love Canadian football or you don't, you got to come away from this game loving Canadian football. The first 2 games of the weekend were just spectacular. You just need to bottle it, put it out on YouTube, put it wherever, your Instagram, your Twitter, anywhere in the world, and get people exposed to this, because, wow, this was spectacular. Now, for the Roughriders with the win, this is huge because they've got the rematch with the Blue Bombers. But even if they lose that game, the Bombers have to find somewhere else to win to catch the Roughriders. If they go evens and then the Riders lose, let's say, to the Bombers the last time they meet in this season, the Riders are still going to win in first place. That's how important this game was. They kept enough of a gap that even with the 2 games left, the Riders would still be 1 up on the Bombers coming into the playoffs.
64 points scored in the first game of Labor Day weekend. Game number 2 said, you're not going to beat us. 68 points scored in this one as the Toronto Argonauts come back at the last second to eclipse the Tiger Cats 35-33 in Hamilton. Talk about wild finishes. This one had everything.
And a capacity crowd, 25,619. It was a record for the Tiger Cats in their new stadium. When the Hamilton Tiger Cats go down and they fire a deep ball, Kenny Lawler, and he catches it, I thought at that moment, oh my goodness, the Argonauts have just given this one away. Bo Levi Mitchell finds him in the end zone soon after. They go up by 1. They go for a 2-point convert. Argonauts say, to heck with this. They get him to ground. No 2-point convert. So it's a 1-point game going into the final 18 seconds. They kick off. Argonauts bring it up to their 44-yard line, and then
an Arbuckle bomb, a dagger to the Hamilton Tiger Cats, sets up the Liram Hiralahu game-winning field goal. Seeing the excitement from Bo Levi Mitchell and the emotion when he threw that touchdown. They got up. He thought this was another storybook game-winning drive by Bo, and the Argonauts did not give up. Nick Arbuckle, calm under pressure, throws a strike, sets up the field goal. Toronto ends up walking it off. 18 seconds. You wouldn't have thought that was going to be too much time left on the clock. But again, with these wild CFL finishes, you get a couple of plays in. That's all you need.
He throws a completion to Dejon Brissett. When you look at that situation, he steals the ball away from two Tiger Cat defenders. He's got Deshaun Amos in front of him. He's got Nick Katsatonis behind him. It was said in the post-game by Davis Sanchez that there was a mistake done by the Tiger Cats. The guy from the back jumps up. The guy from the in front should stay down so that you don't collide with each other. Well, that's exactly what happens. They collided with each other. Brissett takes the football, cuts to his right, and then it's a race against the Ticats and time going towards the goal line. And this reminds me of Dominique Rhymes and the BC Lions against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, where Rhymes catches the ball and takes off for the end zone. Instead of just catching it and getting down to the ground so they can try the field goal, he tries to score a touchdown. Clock runs out as he's tackled at the 10-yard line, and the Lions lose the football game. And I was decrying it at that time. Well, here's Brissett doing the exact same thing. The fortuitous thing for him is that he tries to get to the end zone. He steps out of bounds at the 4-yard line and leaves one tick on the clock.
And that's all they needed. And you look at some of these stats, the quarterbacks both had a night. Nick Arbuckle, 33 for 40, 352 yards and 3 touchdowns. Bo Levi Mitchell eclipses the 400-yard mark, 27 for 37, 405, 3 touchdowns and an interception. You cannot hang the loss on Bo Levi Mitchell and that offense in this one. Kenny Lawler, 9 catches on 9 targets, 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. He is showing that he's back. Keandre Smith goes for 171 yards on 7 catches. Just huge numbers on offense for the Tiger Cats. Their defense let this one get away late. As we mentioned earlier, Nick Arbuckle spread the ball around well, hit the big throw to Dejon Brissett when needed, and it was an easy chip shot field goal after that.
Let's remember in this series before where the Toronto Argonauts score a touchdown, it's Mackay Polk who makes a big catch down the field to set up the touchdown. In fact, the Argonauts score touchdowns on the last 2 possessions of the football game to win, and all of that happening within 4.5 minutes of the finish, and then Milt Stegall hit it on the head. The timing rules in the Canadian Football League in the last 3 minutes create this. Gives every opportunity for teams with 12 seconds left and they're on their own side of the field to make something happen.
Final game of the weekend, the Calgary Stampeders blow out the Edmonton Elks 28-7. Another good crowd, 27,764 at McMahon Stadium, their largest crowd of the season so far. The Elks just really couldn't get anything going in this one. Vernon Adams Jr., a quiet day with the quarterback numbers, but the Stamps put up 28 points, and that was well more than what they needed.
Adams goes 13-23 for 162. Dedrick Mills goes 17 carries for 106 yards to help out. This is complementary football. When your team is rushing in excess of 120 yards and you're throwing for 160, that's still over 280 yards of offense. But the defense was spectacular. The Elks got down the field. They had a chance to score a touchdown, settle for a field goal early in the game. That was as close as they ever got again until the very end when they tried to score at the very end to get a touchdown. And the Stampeders defense said, no, thank you. We'll take care of it from here. That defense in Calgary is special. They are by far the best defense in the league, shutting out the Elks from scoring a touchdown. Stampeders, I believe, in 80% of their games this year have allowed 1 touchdown or less.
They also got supplemental scoring from special teams. Eric Brooks with an 86-yard touchdown on a punt return helps boost those numbers as well. You talk about the Stampeders defense, and I am going to single out one player for his return to the field. Adam Bighill, dressed for this one, 4 tackles. Great to see him back on a field. A bit different to see him wearing the red and white of the Calgary Stampeders and not BC Lions or Winnipeg Blue Bomber colors. But he has made it all the way back from those devastating leg injuries. So big shout out to Big Hill for getting back on the field.
And it's too bad that the Bombers couldn't find a way to keep him on the roster. But given that they've got Tony Jones filling in for Big Hill, it was tough to pay 2 contracts for the same position. And that's why Big Hill wasn't going to be back with Winnipeg. Now, Calgary seeing a need at the time, and they were patient. They let Big Hill get completely healthy, get familiarized with the defense. And he's going to be very impactful if he hasn't been already, because he is a coach out there. He knows how defenses work. He knows from Richie Hall and what they did all those years in Winnipeg and his time in BC. He's a student of the game. I hope he becomes a coach in this league at some point and becomes a defensive coordinator, because I think he'd be fantastic. Not a great game if you want a close, nail-biting finish, but for the Calgary Stampeders, they look dominant. They're 6-0 against the West. They cannot have a losing record against the West this season. And they're doing it against anybody and everybody. They took out the Riders, they swept them. They took out the Bombers, they swept them. They've got the Elks 2 more times and the Lions 2 more times.
4 quarterback sacks for that Calgary defense. The Edmonton offensive line had a real tough time in pass protection. No sacks going the other way. So the Calgary line did its job protecting Vernon Adams Jr. As you mentioned earlier, it was a big rushing game. They didn't need VA to throw for 350 yards to be successful in this one. And once you've got that rush game working for you, it allows you to protect that quarterback, keep him healthy.
Strange stat. The Edmonton Elks dominated time of possession in the third quarter. I believe they had over 11 minutes of ball control in that quarter, and yet it's the Stampeders that left the quarter with more points having been scored in that 15. Can Vernon Adams Jr. make it through a season? It's the same question you have about Trevor Harris. Can he make it through a season? If that happens, Zach Collaros, people wonder about that. Can he make it through a season or the rest of the season? If all of those guys are there, and we've got Nathan Rourke as well, this could be a wild race to the finish in the West.
It is. You've got 3 teams over 500 right now. Saskatchewan leading the way at 9-2. Calgary 1 game back, but Calgary has won that season series again against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So if they finish in a dead heat, Calgary gets the nod. Winnipeg's got the long road to try to get a home playoff date now. They're 4 points back of Calgary. They do not have that season series.
So technically 3 wins behind the Calgary Stampeders at this juncture.
Exactly. Because they don't have that season series, they would have to leapfrog Calgary to get a home playoff date. So it's looking now, with 11 games played by every team, the Bombers and Lions are hard pressed to host a playoff game this year. Both of them might still be playoff teams, but neither one of them is looking like they're going to have a home game.
And for Cody Fajardo, who had led Edmonton to 3 straight wins, just wasn't going to be. He was 21 of 33 for 255 yards, but he took a beating. And we talk about the sacks that he took, but he also took so many hits after he released the football. And there were a few times when I wondered if he would even bother trying to get up, because he was a beaten player.
There's no question the toughness of Cody Fajardo. We've seen him get hit time and again in his seasons with the Saskatchewan Roughriders as well. He's a guy that's going to keep coming back as long as he can stand up. But man, it's tough to watch when he gets beat up like he did in this one.
Terrell Ford, again, I'm going to bring this up. Clark Bonds catches a football at the sideline and Ford submarines him and flips him on his head. What is this? I've seen other players in this league not do that. Receiver jumps up, they put their arm around their hip and they just hang on to them so they don't, when they come down, they don't get anywhere. And Ford has this tendency to decide to go right for the legs and flip the guy. I don't know what is going on here. And I think the league really has to have a little discussion with him, because someone's going to break their neck as a result of this. Everyone thinks what a spectacular play. Yeah, but think of the force and the acceleration that's being created by turning a guy 180 and having him drop from that height.
Third down.
We're back to 4 games on the schedule in the CFL for week 14, starting with the first game on Friday night with the BC Lions going to Ottawa to take on the Red Blacks. Both of these teams are coming off a bye, so we can sort of toss that out the window. The Red Blacks at home, 3.5-point underdogs to the Lions. Drew Brown limited to practice because of his knee injury. If he does not play, this is an easy cover for the BC Lions.
How many conversations have we had trying to pick these wins and losses and talked about if this quarterback plays or if that quarterback plays? It's been a frustrating year from that regard. I expect Drew Brown to play. I think the Red Blacks keep this one close. We know BC can at times struggle going west to far east. Not quite all the way to Montreal, but pretty far east in this one. I would not be shocked to see the Lions come out with the win, but I do think the Red Blacks keep it close and they beat that 3.5-point spread.
Moving to Saturday in the first of 3 games on the schedule for Saturday, we start early with the Hamilton Tiger Cats playing the Montreal Alouettes. The Tiger Cats are 3.5-point favorites on the road in Montreal, and I think this is all to do with Davis Alexander. If Alexander's in the lineup, that line changes dramatically. But as we speak now, which is Tuesday, the Alouettes are the underdog at home, even with all of this defensive help coming up and with some receiver help coming in. Tiger Cats coming off a emotionally crushing loss to the Toronto Argonauts in the most unbelievable fashion. Are they motivated or are they shook up?
I think a little bit shook up in this one. I think that it was so deflating to have gone down the field to get that go-ahead touchdown with 18 seconds on the board, to see that evaporate so quickly and lose at home in a Labor Day matchup against the Toronto Argonauts. I'm expecting a little bit of a letdown here. Montreal Alouettes defense steps up big, and I don't think that the Tiger Cats defense is in the same category of strength as the Montreal Alouettes. I'm picking the Owls at home for the upset.
Ooh. I like the Tiger Cats. I don't like the cover. I think the Alouettes, if Davis Alexander's in this game, watch out. If he isn't, then the Tiger Cats should be able to win, but can they score enough points to cover? That's the question. Saturday later, the Saskatchewan Roughriders are in Winnipeg for the Banjo Bowl, and the Bombers are favored at home by 0.5 point, which basically is pick 'em. Winnipeg traditionally wins this football game. This is sort of a real test for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. If you want to be considered as legitimate in the West, you've got to go in Winnipeg and you've got to beat them, and especially in this game.
Exactly. I think the Roughriders are the clear number 1 in the West right now. Calgary's right behind them. If I was to power rank these teams, I think it does go Riders, Stampeders, Bombers. This is a close 0.5-point spread. The Bombers played an impressive game in Regina on Sunday to keep pace with the Roughriders in a Labor Day game that can often get out of hand. This one, what we saw with Zach Collaros on the road, I think he brings more of that back home to Winnipeg, and the Bombers do get their revenge in the Banjo Bowl and beat the Roughriders.
It's very likely, but again, it's a pick 'em. Craig Dickinson was here when he had his tenure. The Roughriders one time barely fielded a football team because of a rotavirus or a norovirus that was going through the locker room. And so they were basically taxiing, airlifting, anything they could do to get enough people to play that football game. And they lost by a substantial sum. The next year, healthy, they lost by even more. Now, Corey Mace, you've got to go into Winnipeg and you've got to take them out. If you beat them here, Winnipeg is not even on your radar anymore. Now you're just focusing on the Calgary Stampeders and staying ahead of them. And it does you a huge favor if you can do that and beat the Blue Bombers in Winnipeg. However, having said all that, Bombers at home in Banjo, since this series has started, I think the Bombers have won maybe 8 out of 10.
Bombers have won the last 5 Banjo Bowl games. You mentioned a couple of them with Craig Dickinson at the helm. The Bombers hung 50 on them in both of those games, 54-20 in 2022, and 51-6 in 2023. Zach Collaros couldn't miss in that game. I think he had 5 touchdown passes in the first half, and almost 6, if not for a Kenny Lawler drop, would have made it 6 touchdowns on 6 drives. 26-21 last year, a lot closer. Zach Collaros and Trevor Harris both at the helm in that one. We get the Banjo Bowl rematch this year as well.
The late game on Saturday is the rematch. This is the high school night for the Edmonton Elks, and they take on the Calgary Stampeders, their provincial rivals. Stampeders 5.5-point favorites on the road. There's going to be a big crowd in Edmonton for this football game. It's traditionally a very well-attended football game. Can Edmonton find a way to score against this Calgary football team?
No. Next question. Given what we saw in the Labor Day game, I think the Stampeders sweep this one. Stamps are undefeated against the division so far this season, and I don't see that streak ending against the Elks. I believe the Stamps win by 10 points in this one, unless Cody Fajardo and that offense can figure something out, unless that offensive line can keep him upright. It's going to be another long day for the Elks. I'm taking the Stamps to win and cover.
Stampeders lead the league in fewest points allowed. The Edmonton Elks are the worst in the league for points scored. They also have the worst turnover ratio. They also are the worst on second down conversions. It just goes on and on and on. And the one bright spot, Jake Julian is back with the team. He averaged over 50 yards a punt. Field position matters in games like this. Don't ever discount what a punter can do for you. Home field advantage will help the Elks. Is it enough? Are the Stampeders just that good? And you power ranked the Riders ahead of the Stamps. I'm flipping that script. I'm calling the Stampeders better than the Riders. Not because of the 2 in a row that the Stamps have won, but just what Calgary's been doing to everybody. Vernon Adams Jr. has only lost 1 football game as a starting quarterback with that team, and that was November in June when the Red Blacks came in and it was wind and rain. They couldn't throw. Neither team could throw the football. This is an emotionally charged game for the Edmonton Elks. I'll maybe take the Stamps to win, but not to cover.
Interesting stat. The Saskatchewan Roughriders win 65% of the Labor Day matchups against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. The Bombers win 65% of the Banjo Bowls in the rematch against the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
And another interesting stat, the win by the Calgary Stampeders breaks the tie. The 64th game between these two teams, the Stampeders now have won 1 more Labor Day Classic or Battle of Alberta than the Edmonton franchise.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources of the Canadian Football League and 3 Down Nation. For up-to-date, insightful statistics and analysis, please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com. The CFL on CBC theme music is used with written permission from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean. Follow us on Twitter, where our handle is @ThirdDownGamble. Join us again next time. The Third Down Gamble Podcast. Audio worth watching.